Hey, good morning, guys. Hey, I'm back with another dream. And if you never shared any of my posts, I would like you to definitely share this one, because it's really been something that, even though it's a dream, but the Lord had been dealing with me concerning this for years now, and I really didn't understand. And you know how it is, coming out of the world and coming into the church, and sometimes you get worse treatment in some of the churches than you did when you were in the world. Never really understood it, but thank God for His covering, because sometimes it's very sad to see some people come out of the world and they transition over to some of the churches, but they get more damaged in the church than they did when they were in the world. And the churches are supposed to be a place where people can come as they are. And I mean, they can come as they are, and I believe in my heart that when they continue to come and they begin to get the word and begin to come in contact with the Holy Spirit, then there would be changes made in their lives. But it's very disheartening to come to a hospital and you leave worse than you were when you first came in. And I just wanted to share this dream. And I was standing in this huge church, and it was filled with a lot of people, and the place was lit up. It was very bright at first, and the longer I stood there, then the lights began to get dimmer. And what was crazy is that everyone in the church was whispering, and they was pointing, and they was looking at this one particular lady who had made a mistake. And it wasn't a mistake that she currently made. It was a mistake that she made years ago, according to what was being saying, what was being said when the people were whispering and when they was pointing, and I could hear what they were saying while they were pointing fingers, and I could hear the words. You know how it is, I didn't hear the words out loud, but I could hear my spirit what they was saying, and it was words of judgment, and it was words, y'all, that sounded holy but carried no mercy. Yeah, I want to talk to the Dekan Dadabasi. And this morning I want to talk not to the world. I want to talk to the ones that are in the church. The ones who say they know Him, but they are quick to judge. They're quick to speak words that sound holy, but what you're speaking is carrying no mercy. And as I was in the dream, I began to hear the voice of God. And the Lord asked me, He said, "Son, why are you standing with the crowd?" My God. And when the Lord asked me that in the dream, y'all, I began to look down at my hands, and guess what? I realized that I had been holding stones in my hands as well. We're not talking literally, we're not talking about real stones. I'm talking about memories and opinions that I have kept about people in their past. Yeah, we all done been guilty. Let's be real. We all done been guilty. And some of us has been delivered. But some of us have chosen to remain in their judgment seat with no mercy. But when the Lord asked me why I was standing with the crowd, my heart began to sink. And then all of a sudden, y'all, the scene, it shifted. And once it shifted, I found myself outside of the church, and I was standing behind the same lady that everyone was judging. And what was crazy is she was weeping. She was broken. But what was surrounding her was a glow that I didn't notice when they was whispering and pointing their fingers at her. And the Lord told me, he said, son, you see, the world doesn't bound them to their past. The Lord spoke to me, he said, son, my own people do. And the Lord told me, he said, son, those who say they know me often forget what I restored them from or delivered them from. And then y'all, all of a sudden I saw this big mirror in front of me. At that time, I began to see my whole life flash before me. I'm talking about I'm talking about when I begin to see my life flash before me, I begin to see the times that I failed. The times when God quietly covered me instead of allowing me to be exposed. In the dream, y'all, I begin to cry. I begin to tell the Lord, forgive me. And the Lord told me, he said, son, if you, in the dream, the Lord told me, he said, if you truly want to walk in my spirit, you must also walk in restoration. And I began to fall on my knees. And I began to weep before the Lord in the dream. And the Lord told me, he said, son, to be spiritual is not to expose. It is to heal. So once again, I want to talk to those. Yeah, you standing in the pulpit. You're preaching. You're teaching. You're speaking prophetically, and and it's almost like you're hitting the nail on the head. But where is your humility to be able to restore? And as the Lord told me this, to be spiritual is not to expose, it is to heal. And after the Lord spoke this, y'all, the light returned to the church, and it was brighter than before, and I could feel the presence of love in that place. And y'all, when I woke up, I knew exactly what God was showing me in this dream. And what the Lord began to show me is that spiritual maturity is not about remembering what someone has done. It's about reminding them who they can still become. It's very disheartening, y'all, because I've been in this place. And it's very disheartening because it's coming from those that's been in the church, that should have enough revelation and understanding that we're not to judge. God is the judge. So I just want to talk to these people that has the stones in their hands. And what God is desiring to do, y'all, is God is desiring to restore a true heart of spiritual restoration within his people. And see, one thing I love about God, that God can be real with me and I can be real with him. Because God wasn't just showing me about a scene in a dream. He was showing me in a mirror. And what I saw was not just about others, y'all. When I had the stones in my hand, it was about God showing me my own posture towards people's past. Because one thing that I've learned, y'all, it's easy to talk about grace until God requires you to extend grace towards someone else. And I'm telling you, and the Lord began to deal with me, y'all, about what we call silent judgment. The ones that are sitting in the pews in the church, and not the world, but for those who claim to represent him, and those who call him by his name, and those that's attending Sunday morning services, and those that are attending Bible study, and those that are laying hands and casting out demons, and you laying hands and people are being healed. Lord, I hear you. But the Bible tells us in Galatians 6:1, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, the Bible say, ye which are spiritual. Somebody being overtaken in the fault will sometimes expose your level of spiritual maturity. And the Bible says, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Let me put a pin right there, because what I've seen even in the churches, that you have some churches that have become very selective when it comes to who they want to restore and who they don't want to restore. And I know a lot of y'all getting ready to probably disagree with me or get upset, but I promise you it'll be all over once I'm done. And I remember the Lord showing me, because, and when I say that we can be very selective, because you can have people that come from all walk of life. They can be prostitutes, they can be drug addicts, they can be drug dealers, they can be liars, they can be whoremongers, and we embrace them and welcome them with open arms. But it's just something about when you have those that are coming from alternative lifestyles, and they're coming out of lesbianism, and they're coming out of homosexuality, then we become very selective. Yeah, I'm going here this morning. We become very selective. And we really don't embrace them like we embrace everybody else. And the most disheartening thing is that when you have leaders, I'm getting ready to go here, that can stand in the pulpit and they can call those that come from alternative lifestyle, they can call them bulldaggers, they can call them faggots, they can call them sissies, they can call them everything else but the child of God. That's very disheartening, because we have to understand that they're still humans. Because you don't find leaders calling women whores from the pulpit that have lived the lifestyle of a whore. We don't stand up in the pulpit and call people liars that we know that they was liars when they was in the world. But God told me, he say, son, he say, in this season, he said, the way that I'm going to reveal the level of the church spiritual maturity, he said, when I send the homosexuals and the lesbian in, they're going to know the level of love and compassion that's in their heart. My God. My God. Because God began to tell me. He said, son, true spirituality is not found in correction without compassion. The Lord told me, he said, son, is found in restoration through humility. It's time for the church to pull up and begin to see things the way that God sees. And God told me, and the Lord told me, he said, son, it's not the world holding people hostage to their past. He said, it's my own people. Because y'all know when we was in the world, we didn't have a problem with sinning openly. But it's crazy that when you come into the church, they sometimes sin silently. What do you mean that they sin silently? Because when they don't have the power to restore through humility, they sin by way of silently because they begin to operate in the spirit of pride. Am I talking this morning? They begin to operate in a spirit of gossip. They begin to operate in a spirit of unforgiveness. And then have the audacity to disguise it as discernment. Am I talking to somebody? And what the Lord began to show me, he says, son, what some of the churches have done is that they have turned testimonies into evidence and treat people like their mistakes are life sentences rather than lessons. And could I just talk to y'all, because once again, a lot of y'all may disagree with it, but 9 times out of 10, if you stick a fork in it, you'll see that it's done. And one of the most dangerous things you can encounter is preachers who preach the loudest. I'm not saying all preachers, but you have some preachers who preach the loudest against certain sins. They are often battling the very thing that they are preaching against. They are battling it internally. What do you mean? And I don't know if y'all remember the guy who carried out the mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, where he decided that he just wanted to kill a lot of gay people. And I remember when it happened, I remember telling my son, I remember telling those that were and I remember telling my son and the ones that are close to me, and I begin to tell them, I say, watch. I said, when they investigate, they going to discover that this man was battling with homosexuality. And true enough, when they begin to do the investigation, because he was a man, he was manly, he was muscular, he was very masculine, he didn't look like he had any feminine characteristics, he didn't look like what we say a faggot, a homosexual, or a sissy. He didn't have all of those charismas. He was very masculine, but he was struggling internally. He was struggling in such a way that what he was struggling with internally was what he was facing daily, and he couldn't deal with it. And what do you mean? Because you have some preachers that'll stand up in the pulpit and they will preach against one particular sin for so long and so hard. But what I found out is that the reason why a lot of them are preaching against it, because you don't want the people eyes on you. You want them to position their eyes on the people that you're supposedly be preaching against. Y'all better talk to me this morning. But these types of people become dangerous because it then begins to reveal how unresolved internal conflict, y'all better hear me this morning, can breathe outward judgment and destruction. When they begin to do this investigation, when this man carried out this mass shooting, they begin to pull videos and they begin to show him picking up men at the club and taking them home. But all of a sudden, it wasn't really because he hated them. It was because he was dealing with it internally and he didn't know how to deal with it. One thing that I've learned, and let's be real, sometimes it's hard to forgive others because we've never truly forgiven ourselves. Whether we acknowledge our thing that we're dealing with internally or not. Because how many of y'all know when it comes to self-hatred and shame, when it's left undealt with, it then becomes what we look at it as being disguised as righteousness and judgment towards others. And it's just crazy how the church can so judge people from things. I'm talking about truly people that have been delivered, but we will hold on to what people have done. But we can sit up under a pastor that is currently molesting children. We can sit up under pastors that are currently sleeping with the deacon's wife. We're not talking about something that the pastor has done in the past, but I'm talking about things that he's doing currently. But we will hold people past against what they done 20 years ago, but we will sit up under pastor that is currently and in secretly involved in sin. Make it make sense. Let's make it make sense. So what are you saying, prophet? When Jesus shedded his blood just wasn't shedded for one particular sin. The blood was shedded for all sins. And the Lord had told me, listen, y'all. And the Lord told me, he said, son, restoration cannot exist where comparison lives. Restoration cannot exist where comparison lives. What do you mean, prophet? Y'all know how these church folks, we can be real deep. And we begin to compare one another's sin. Well, I was a liar, so I wasn't as bad as the one that was on drugs. You know, I did cocaine, but I wasn't as bad as the man that was sleeping with another man, or the woman that was sleeping with another woman. So we begin to compare. Because say restoration cannot exist where comparison lives. But God told me, he said, son, true restoration requires compassion that outlives memories You notice we're going to go back to the dream. Because notice in the dream I saw stones in my hand. And like I said, not physical ones, but they were invisible judgments. They were assumptions. They were beliefs that someone must prove their change before they are accepted. That's the way the church is, y'all. That's the way the church is. It's almost like they want people to prove their change before they can accept them. I gotta go here, y'all. I got to go here. But we can do all of that. But then when it comes to those, once again, that comes from different alternative lifestyles. For some reason, I've heard all of my life coming up, not just from people in the world, but people in the church. They're quick to say, once a sissy, always a sissy. So, but it's crazy though that how I can understand if the world felt like that. But if you're a Christian, if you've been redeemed, if you've been and by the blood of the Lamb, you understand that when the blood is applied, you will begin to understand that they were once like that. But when the blood is applied, it put them in a position of once was, but now they're becoming. Prophet, why you talk? I'm talking about this because this is going to be some of the church people's greatest failure when it comes to restoring certain people. And I'm telling you, when I woke up, y'all, and God began to tell me, when he began to show me the stones in my hand. And God told me, he said, son, every stone you hold can delay someone's deliverance. And that thing broke my heart. He said, every stone you hold can delay someone's deliverance. Because we're so busy trying to remember what they did more than what God is doing in them now. I'm telling you, I hadn't always been here. And the reason why I was so quick to judge at one point in my life, because I was only doing what others was doing to me. It was judging me. So I started judging other people. Could we just be real, y'all? But I truly had to learn that the weight of unforgiveness was not measured by what I was saying, y'all, but by what I was refusing to let go. And that's the same way it is with the church. They're refusing to let go of what people have done and what people used to be. But I want to help you understand something. It was so profound. I'm telling you, it's going to be so many people that's going to be spent the majority of your life in church and so-called serving God. But you're going to allow something this simple to allow you to miss God. And when you look at Revelations, the second chapter, verses 2-4, Jesus was rebuking this same spirit. And Jesus said, I know thy work and thy labor and thy patience. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them liars. But Jesus said, nevertheless, I have something against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. So explain this to prophet. Explain this to me, prophet. What are you saying, prophet? Because y'all, we can become so quick to judge and expose others that we find ourselves drifting away from the very heart of Christ, who is our first love. Because God told me, he said, son, when love leaves, judgment takes the throne. What do you mean, prophet? God began to show me that there are so many people in the church that have become so judgmental that where there was once love in the heart, judgment has set in their heart. And their heart has become a throne for judgment to sit, rule, and reign. And God told me, he said, son, when people start taking my place as the judge, they begin to distance themselves from my presence. And let's go back to the dream when God placed that mirror before me. He wasn't just showing me other people's failures. He showed me mine. How every time I failed, he covered me. How every time I failed, he restored me quietly. And what God is saying this morning, why do you want to public expose what he desire to privately heal and make whole? And God told me, he said, son, tell them that they cannot be a person of restoration while trying to remember and hold on to what people have done. I know this is a little lengthy, but I want to talk to you this morning. Because a lot of times, y'all, we can't allow our emotions to begin to entangle with our level of spiritual restoration. Because when you think about the word restore, it means to bring something back to its original condition. Because a lot of times when we restore someone spiritually, we're not excusing what they've done or what they did, y'all. We are reintroducing them to who they were created to be before the fall. Could I say that again, y'all? When we restore someone spiritually, that's why the Bible says they that are spiritually, we are not excusing what they have done or what they did. We are reintroducing them to who they were created to be before the fall. Yeah, let me be clear, because I don't want you to take it wrong. I'm not giving people license to do what they want to do. No, I'm not doing that. Because one thing about true restoration, y'all, it does not overlook sin. It overcomes it through grace and accountability. And just what I had to experience, grace and accountability. But when I really experienced that, then I realized that wherever there's real grace and accountability, It calls people out of shame and reposition them back into their destiny. And I had to learn this, y'all. And one thing that I had to learn, y'all, that restoration was not about forgetting the past. It's about refusing to let the past define your future. Let me help somebody else. I'll say that again. I had to come to the understanding that restoration was not about forgetting the past. It's about refusing to let the past define your future. And let's go back to the other part of the dream where you begin to see the light and how it returned back into the church, and that the light, y'all, it represented divine love. And when we allow the love and the compassion to return back to the house, that's when we're going to experience real revival. That's why a lot of churches call it a revival. But true revival involves having the love of God and the compassion of God. Because one thing that I've learned, that because of love and compassion, it does something that judgment cannot. What do you mean, prophet? It's only when there's love and compassion in the house that true transformation can take place. And the Lord told me, he said, son, he said, true restoration is not about who was right, but it's about who is willing to love like me again. And I wanted to share this because I'm telling you, it's God's desire that he's wanting to raise up people that have the ability to restore, not to react, but the ability to restore. And I believe in my heart that God is calling forth those who can see people through his mercy and not through their mistakes. And I just want to talk to the ones that are listening to me and you have stones in you. I take authority over that stone throwing spirit right now. I command you to loose those stones and put your hands in your pocket. Because if you're one of the ones that's finding yourself standing with stones in your hand, just remember, the one who stooped down when everyone else stood up to accuse. And from this day forward, before you speak against someone's past, ask yourself, where would I be if God kept a record of mine? Because true evidence of spiritual maturity, y'all, is not how well we preach, prophesy, perform. It's how deeply we can restore. When you get a chance, I want you to go and look at Galatians 6:1. Those who are spiritually must restore. Because one thing that I've learned, because if we fail to restore, we're no longer spiritually. We're simply wasting our time because we're more religious than we are spiritually. So before I let you go, let me tell you something. Return to your first love. Lay down your stones. Let love and compassion begin to lead. Because guess what? That's where the lights return. Love you guys. Continue to pray for me and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.